All right, so I wanted to respond to this comment because I really find it annoying when people don't listen to what you say and they just keep making the same argument. So I feel like the only way sometimes is just to make a video, just put it out there, and that's it. So we're arguing about whether Iraq is Najd, right, or Najd is in Arabia, right? Why do the Salafis care about this? Because Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab came from Najd, and the Prophet said tribulations would come from Najd. So of course they don't want Najd to be Arabia. And so first of all, I want to start off by showing you the character of Salafis, right? This is their character. Insults, calling people this, throughout, he multiple other comments he made are insults. This is the character of the Salafis, the people who claim to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet. You're an insult to the Prophet when you say that you follow his Sunnah and then you use insults, right? Because he said to control your tongue, right? If you actually follow his Sunnah, it wouldn't be so easy for you to insult people, right? But it's very easy for Salafis to do that because they don't follow the Sunnah of the Prophet. So, anyways, he quotes a few statements where the Prophet says this, right? Now, I talked about this, right? And I believe it's right here. So this hadith says, Najd is where the earthquakes will rise, right? This same hadith has a different wording where he uses the word Iraq. Now, what I believe personally is that when there's two versions of a hadith with different wording, the Prophet probably only said one of them, right? Most likely he didn't say one time he said Najd and then another. I don't think he said this twice. One time Najd, one time Iraq. He either said Iraq or Najd. Now, most books have the Najd version, right? So you can't just say that both versions are what he said. He most likely said either one or the other. Do you think he said only Iraq? Well, that's actually the version you find less. Okay. Now I'm gonna explain to you why Najd can't be in Iraq. All right. It's pretty simple, and we're gonna keep going. Hold on. I asked him this question: why did the Prophet have wars in a place called Najd if the Prophet never fought in Iraq? Right? This is his response, is all this stuff that has nothing to do with what I said. This is why I'm making the video, because you can't talk to these people. They don't listen. Not a single scholar, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, I want to start off by saying that this is one of the Prophet's invasions. Dat Arika, right? The Prophet began this and that and that. Took the area of Najd, right? And I mentioned this here. Let's find it. One second. All right, one second. Hold on. All right, so here it is. It says on the authority of Ibn Umar that the Prophet sent an expedition to Najd, right? It is a fact that the Muslims did not go to Iraq until the Prophet died. It was under Abu Bakr that they went and invaded Iraq. They did not invade Iraq under the Prophet. So how did he send an expedition to Najd if they did not fight a war in Najd until after he died? And the only wars we know of where he fought in Najd was in Arabia, right? Not in Iraq. There's no desert Bedouins, right? This war, Dar Arika, is known to be in Arabia, not in Iraq, right? If you want other sources, I believe this is a Salafi website, which also says that it was in Najd, right? Right, against the Quraysh. There's no Jews of Medina in Iraq, right? So it just doesn't make sense. You're saying that it was in Najd, but they weren't fighting in Iraq. They're fighting in Arabia. Now, so my question simply is, I want you to answer this because you don't answer. You just keep saying other stuff. It's pretty simple. Why was there a battle in Najd, and it's in a hadith, the expedition to Najd, during the time of the Prophet, but it did not take place in Iraq? If Najd is in Iraq, right, then why does he have a battle there if we know that the Prophet never had a battle in Iraq? Even if you look here, I use this hadith. This hadith, the Prophet makes a distinction between the people of Iraq and the people of Najd, right? That tells me that they're two different things, at least in his understanding. And during the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, Najd was in Arabia, right? So, I mean, here's another one. I took part in a ghazwa towards Najd, right? And we clashed with the enemy, with the Prophet Muhammad. When did the Prophet fight in Iraq? Answer that question. I don't want to hear all these excuses. This is pretty simple, right? They did not fight in Iraq. That's it. There's another hadith where he says when Iraq was mentioned, the Prophet said at that time it was not a Muslim country, right? Which indicates that it was not, the Muslims did not go there yet, right? He does mention Najd as uh, in the category, most likely assuming that they were a Muslim country. And like I said, some of the people from Najd came and asked where is Hajj. Another thing I want to talk about, lying against those who oppose you, Khawarij. He always used the word Khawarij, right? Often mentioning them. The irony is that I think the Salafis uh, align more with the Khawarij than anybody else, right? And actually, if you look at the history of that, I have a chapter in my book about comparing the Wahhabis and the Khawarij. I wanted to start with a Hanbali scholar who wrote this book about the Wahhabiyah. And I don't want to read the whole thing because it takes long, but you could read it yourself. Uh, Take a careful look at how they release charges for kuffar on the Muslims, declaring their blood and wealth permissible for spilling, right, towards the Muslims. It is Ibn Abdul Wahhab who's responsible for this issue. And others mention issue who's brought this hastily thrown together set of principles. Right? And in the end, he said, is the creed of the people of Haruriya, the Khawarij, being propounded as well as the device of shaitan being used. Right? So I wanted to show that somebody from each madhab declared the Wahhabis to be Khawarij. Right? Starting with a Hanbali. Right? Now let's look at other madhabs. A Hanafi scholar who wrote a book, his name is Ibn Abidin, he wrote a book called Kitab al-Dur al-Mukhtar. Right? And he writes, there will be three who disobey the Imams, right? And the Kharijites, they're people who have a defense, who came out against him with an interpretation that they believe is on falsehood, fighting with their interpretation. They make our blood and our money lawful, right? That's what's the distinguishing trait of the Khawarij, is that they fight the Muslims and kill them, right? Which is exactly what the Wahhabis do. Go look at my last video. All right, and now let's keep going. He continues to say they did not allow with the Khawarij. It's allowed for the blood of the Muslims and the captivity of their offspring, right? He keeps going. And there's the important part. I don't want to read everything, but a demand among the followers of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, the Kharijites in our time, right? A Hanafi scholar saying this. A Hanbali and Hanafi both agree. The Kharijites and the Wahhabis are the same thing. At least the Kharijites of our time are the Wahhabis. And he says, among the followers of him, Abdul Wahhab, who left Najd, by the way, and overcame the two holy mosques. And remember, you just told me that no scholar said that no scholar, even the Asharis, said that it's in here, Najd is in Iraq, blah, blah, blah. Well, this scholar says that among the followers of Abdul Wahhab who came from Najd, right? And that's all you need to know. And they were impersonating the Hanbali school of thought, but they believed that they were Muslims. Those who opposed their belief were polytheists, right? That's what they did. I showed you in my last video. I don't need to prove that to you. And the rule of the Kharijites, according to the majority of Jews, is that they're the rule of transgressors. You can read the whole thing if you want. The point is, it makes it very clear that the Kharijites and the Wahhabis are the same thing. That's a Hanafi and a Hanbali. Now let's keep going. I have one from every madhab. Maliki scholar, Imam Ahmed bin Muhammad al-Sawi al-Maliki, right? And he says about this in his tafsir. He wrote an interpretation of a tafsir. This ayah was revealed about Khawarij, who misinterpreted the Quran and Hadith, legitimizing the killing of other Muslims and the property taking. If you watch my last videos, that's exactly what the Wahhabis did against everyone, right? That's a fact. As it is seen now, the equal who are grouped in the land of Hijaz, called Al-Wahhabiyah, right? Who think they are following the truth, but they are liars whom which the shaitan has overwhelmed. Now I've shown you three scholars from each madhab declaring that the Wahhabis are Khawarij. Now, we have another one, the Shafi Grand Mufti Ahmed Zaini Dahlan, from the same era. He wrote a book called Fitnat al-Wahhabiyya. How can Ibn Abdul Wahhab and those who follow him find it permissible to equate the believers who believe in Tawheed to those who believe in idols, right? Which is exactly what they did. Describe the Khawarij as those who took the verses of the revealed about the infidels and attributed it to the believers, right? This is a known statement. Right, so he clearly compares the Khawarij to the Wahhabis, right? That's exactly what he does throughout his book. Those who came before the Wahhabis, like the Khawarij, right? And we find that each of the each scholar from each madhab compares the Wahhabis to the Khawarij. For you who keep saying Khawarij, Khawarij, it's you guys that are more like the Khawarij. The ISIS and all these terrorist groups, they're exactly like Khawarij because the majority of their victims are other Muslims, right? And, I quoted a few hadiths that, to me, resemble the Wahhabi movement. They will recite the Quran, but it would not go deeper than their throats. What does this mean? It means essentially that it will not reach their heart, right? It will not go deeper than their throats. It will not reach their heart. And honestly, if you observe the way that they practice Islam, it has no heart to it. It's all just, outward appearance, right? They'll pass through Islam like an arrow passing through its target, right? There's other hadiths, right? Your prayer will be nothing compared to their prayers, and your fasting, right? They will recite it thinking it is in their favor, but it is against them. And this is true if you think about it. The Salafis are always showing off their actions. Like, look at us, we have big beards, we're better than everyone, right? But there's a hadith from the Prophet, because they'll undermine that and be like, look at us, our prayer and fasting is so good. There's a statement from the Prophet who says, I haven't prepared much for the last hour, but I love Allah and His Messenger. The Prophet said, you will be with whom you love, right? Indicating that this is more important, right? Not just the actions, but the intention, the faith, the love for Allah and His Apostle is more valuable than these. And there's another statement, by his good character, I believe it will attain the degree of one who prays during the night and fasts during the day. All right. Indeed, the person with good character will have attained the rank of the person of fasting and prayer. Nothing is heavier on the scale than good character, right? He does not look, he looks at your hearts, right? The Prophet says. Right, so anyways, I don't need to show you everything here. But the point is that, and he has many different statements about the Khawarij, right? I don't know if I should go into all of it, but here's something from Ibn Taymiyyah, who says they make it permissible for the blood and property of Muslims to be halal. It's exactly what the Wahhabis do, right? He says they will emerge from the east, right? In one version he says at the end time there will appear young people with foolish minds, right? That could be the Wahhabi movement. There's a lot of different hadiths relating to this. They will kill the Muslims but leave the idol worshippers alone, right? That is known what the Wahhabis do. And actually, this is actually something the Wahhabis did. This is written in their own history book, Kitab al-Durara as-Saniyya. And scenes of polytheism, right? Polytheism is apparent, even though they testify that there's no God but Allah, right? So they say, even though these people testify that there's no God but Allah, they are still polytheists. This is the Wahhabis speaking themselves, right? And they actually mention it in the same statement that they spare the Jews and Christians, but they attack the Muslims, right? That's similar to the Khawarij, right? And they say if somebody says La ilaha illallah, then he's not you cannot call him a disbeliever. And this Wahhabis say that this is wrong, right? To him, that's incorrect. If polytheism appears, right, you get the point. The point is that to them, um, saying La ilaha illallah does not make you a Muslim, right? So he disagrees with the Prophet, who, in his explanation, that is good enough to be considered to be a Muslim, right? And this is, this is the Prophet's statement itself. I'm commanded to fight until they testify that there is no God but Allah. And then when they do that, their life and property are safe from me, right? So the testification is all that is required. This disagrees with the Wahhabis disagree with that. To them, that's not enough, right? And he makes that very clear. Whoever says this, then you cannot call him a misbeliever, right? He obviously disagrees with that. And he actually even quotes this, I believe, right? He says, I have been commanded to fight the people until they testify, right? And then he says, Islam is to testify, right? Let's see how he responds to this. And so his response to that hadith says, I did not know its meaning, right? If you did not know the meaning of La ilaha illallah, then it doesn't count, right? And so according to him, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, according to him, these people who said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah did not know the meaning of it, right? So you understand that it disagrees with the Prophet. The Prophet merely is focused on testification. But he thinks that the meaning is different. So he changes the meaning of it to disagree with what the Prophet said. So he says that it's saying, knowing, and doing, right? Even though that's not the statement of the Prophet himself. Not to say that we disagree entirely, but the idea is that if you testify, then you're safe, right? Interestingly, here's a description about 700 years before the Wahhabi movement. It's in the history of Damascus, written by Ibn Asakir. And he says, if God allowed the Kharijites, from their opinion, the land would have been corrupted, the paths would be cut off, and the pilgrimage would be cut off from the sacred house, right? And he describes the Khawarij, and you actually find that, let me pause. Yeah, I was trying to find this. So, in this is a history book written by the Wahhabis, right? And it mentions Mecca was blocked from the side of Yemen, right, in Hijaz, meaning that people couldn't go make Hajj. And it is known that during the era of the Wahhabis, Muslims could not do the Hajj. So it actually agrees with Ibn Asakir's history books. He says that Ibn Asakir, 700 years prior, he said if the Khawarij had their way, then we wouldn't be able to go to Hajj, which is exactly what happened, right? And they went to war in Medina, and they did not allow people to go to Hajj. This is known, right? And so it predicts exactly how the Khawarij would behave. So there's definitely, I think there's a lot of strong evidence that the Khawarij, Wahhabis, are following the Khawarij in some way, at least in character, right? There's a lot of resemblance between them. Really, the key is that they kill Muslims. That's their main enemy. You can read all this. All of this is them. This is very good. Look right here. People of Rauda killed them, right? This is the Wahhabis attacking other Muslims, right? The country of Zulfi took their spoils from the Muslims, right? Invaded Riyadh. People of Riyadh were killed. Killed 10 men among them, right? And they killed everyone, really, right? Raided the country, took their sheep. And I have a lot of this stuff throughout my book, where you can see that all of the attacks they had and all the people they killed, they're all Muslims, all of them. Yeah, they only attacked the Muslims. All right, I think I made my point here. So there's a lot of stuff here, but I think I made my point.